Here we go!
My friends, have you ever seen a movie so bad that it was good? Perhaps you're a fan of Mystery Science Theater 3000. Imagine a speedrun so bad that watching it causes you to roll on the floor in laughter. Is this guy serious? What's the matter with him? This is the case with Wouter Jansen's DK64 run. That was one of the funniest things I've ever watched in my entire life. This is some funny stuff. That's not really a speedrun, was it? Because I've never even played the game and I knew what he was supposed to do at some stages, yet he didn't seem to? But what exactly could cause such a raucous reaction to a simple speedrun video posted? Especially one played by Wouter Jansen, by some metrics the greatest GoldenEye speedrunner in history, setting more world records than anyone else in the entirety of the game's lore and record keeping. Surely, playing a game created by the same developers on the same video game console as the one in his wheelhouse wouldn't result in something considered one of the worst speedruns of all time, would it? My friends, this is the unbelievable and unhinged story of some truly deep speedrun lore. A piece of early internet history, a speedrun oddity we've come to know as Wouter Goes Bananas. If you're a longtime viewer of this channel, you'll be familiar with this story's protagonist, Wouter Jansen. But to quickly refresh your memory, Wouter burst onto the speedrun scene in its earliest days, all the way back in 1999, claiming numerous GoldenEye world records that were far better than what others had achieved at the time. After some initial suspicion, Wouter would go on to capture videos of his runs, something extremely rare and technically challenging at the time, not only proving his speedrun ability, but in fact setting a great example by becoming the first player to have videos widely available of the majority of his speedrun records. Wouter's career would see him set more GoldenEye world records than anyone else in the history of the game, a distinction he still holds to this day. Even more records than the likes of Perfect Ace, Boss, Clemens, Carl Jobst, or even Mark Rutsu. Now, getting records back at the dawn of speedrunning was easier since the game was less optimized, but even so, Wouter remains one of the game's most iconic legends. And one could argue that without characters like Wouter sparking interest and pushing speedrunning forward since the late 90s, speedrunning might never have grown into what it's become today, making Wouter one of the most influential speedrunners of all time. And so, while Wouter was indeed the GoldenEye champion from around 1999 to 2003, after he finally saw his reign relinquished to the dominant Big Boss Man in 2003, Wouter would begin dabbling in other games. In this case, the yellow cartridged classic, Rare's Donkey Kong 64 for the Nintendo 64. Now, DK64 is notorious as the collectathon to end all collectathons, taking dozens of hours for people to complete at 101%, a perfect completion of the game. So it was quite a change of pace for Wouter, from playing levels which were in some cases only around 20 seconds, to a game like DK64, where the full entire speedrun could take, who knows, 10, 20, 30 hours or more. And not only that, but there was even a further challenge in that, at this point in time, somewhere in 2004, there genuinely had not been a completed and uploaded DK64 speedrun made by anyone. I know this sounds insane and almost impossible given the game was released in 1999, and nowadays we see speedruns of games within hours of their release, but speedrunning was just so much smaller back then, and given the difficulty in recording and uploading videos, it's no surprise that a hugely lengthy game like DK64 would have just never seen anyone get around to dabbling in it as a speed game. But Wouter was doing just that indeed. He mostly kept this dabbling to himself, with very few knowing what he was getting up to for this next little while. At some point in mid-late 2004, Wouter seems to have gotten a run that he was happy with, and submitted it to Speed Demo's archive for verification, really the only place around that hosted speedruns for most games at this point in time. There were a few ranking websites specific to some games, like The Elite for GoldenEye and Perfect Dark, or MarioKart64.com for the Mario Kart games, but most other games had no dedicated rankings or leaderboards. And so Speed Demos Archive was the only place one could submit a run in order to share it with the world and see your name on the internet as the one acclaimed with a wonderful speedrun. But in order to understand what happened next, we need to first go over the process that entailed getting your speedrun verified on Speed Demos Archive. Now we have to keep in mind that this was in an era, the mid-2000s, where technology was a lot slower. The community was much smaller, and speedrunning was far more niche. The actual idea behind Speed Demos Archive, or SDA, as a whole, was not a world records ranking website, but rather simply an archive of decent or presentable speedruns. They absolutely did not have to be world records, and in most cases were not, but they did have to be at least subjectively presentable, decent, and close to world-class tier, or at least what would one expect a competent speedrunner to perform in whichever game one is playing. So, you would record your speedrun on some kind of recording media, usually a VHS tape or a DVD through a DVD recorder. This was, of course, before video capture cards were widely available, let alone before many computers could handle the process of capturing a live video feed without massive lag or frame drops. This is also, by the way, why segmented speedrunning was much more popular in this era, since for long games it was a near impossible feat to find a recording medium on which you could record one unbroken session of more than 2 hours. But anyways, you can see it was near impossible to record a speedrun in a game like Donkey Kong 64 101% in one straight go, using consumer goods available at the time. You would instead plan out your speedrun in segments that were less than 2 hours, so each segment could fit on its own tape or DVD, which would then be assembled together at a later point in time. So, once you had successfully performed an entire segmented speedrun on these VHS tapes or DVDs, you would then mail this package to a volunteer who would watch and verify the speedrun. Sometimes if there were, say, 10 VHS tapes, you would be sending over quite a sizable box through the post service. Combining traditional parcel service with the process of a volunteer verifier watching a multiple hour speedrun, looking for any cheats or missing parts or improprieties, well, it was certainly a lengthy process. And then the volunteer would have to use their capture card to record the whole thing, again, usually in multiple segments. And of course, this was an era before widely available social media or video sharing, believe it or not, so these video files usually had to be uploaded to a private server using file transfer protocol, which required technically savvy community members to have the capabilities to host and transfer large files. You know, very few people were on YouTube in this moment, and even then you couldn't upload something longer than 15 minutes. You know, we take all this for granted today, but back then, getting any speedrun video online, especially one longer than just a couple of minutes, was quite an onerous process, requiring the cooperation, time, and specialized technical ability of numerous speedrun enthusiasts. And so it would regularly take many months, even a year or longer, from the point when a speedrun was performed to the point when it actually made its way online to Speed Demos Archive, widely available for anyone on the internet to download and watch themselves. And of course, this is yet another reason why Speed Demos Archive rarely ever hosted the current world records of any given speed game, because by the time a run was finally uploaded, it had usually been beaten by someone else. But that was considered okay and all good, because after all, Speed Demos Archive billed itself as a historical archive rather than a records ranking site. So, one side effect of this whole process was that from the time a speedrun was performed to the time it reached a wider audience, you would usually get rumblings or rumors about what someone had been working on, what kinds of strategies might have been used, and just what might be coming to the speedrun community in the months or years ahead. You know, maybe you heard that someone was attempting to speedrun a game for the first time ever. And indeed, the rumblings around Wouter's Donkey Kong 64 speedrun were no different. Many people were surprised that none other than GoldenEye legend and past champion Wouter Jansen was going to submit a Donkey Kong 64 speedrun, and many wondered what might be in store. Surely, many thought, he would usher in an era of amazing strategies and incredible gameplay to DK64, just as he did with GoldenEye years earlier. And this is probably what the volunteer verifiers of Wouter's Donkey Kong run, Brad Cyberwrath Cutler and David Marshmallow Gibbons, were expecting to see when they finally received Wouter's tapes, popped them into a VCR, and watched his remarkable submission. Now, it should bear to mention that Marsh was something of an early gaming legend himself. The guy wrote one of the earliest, best Ocarina of Time 100% walkthrough guides on game FAQs, helping probably millions of people complete that game, one of the greatest games ever. He performed dozens of speedruns, which were early demos on SDA on both Nintendo 64 and Super Nintendo. In some cases, these were even the world record in some games for many years. And he was just generally a man before his time. The amount of gaming content Marsh put out there in the days before a gaming content creator was really a thing was simply incredible. This is all to say that Marsh had been around for a long time and had seen a thing or two, but nothing could prepare him for what he was about to see on the set of videotapes sent to him by the legend Wouter Jansen. Marsh and Cyberwrath were so shocked at what they saw that they couldn't quite figure out what to do with the run at first. They hopped into Ventrilo on numerous nights, making their way through an Odyssean 14-hour segmented speedrun. At some point in 2004, they uploaded this run to archive.org first and foremost, just to put it somewhere while figuring out if and how they could verify it for use on Speed Demo's archive. And after nearly 2 years of sitting on the footage, they finally realized what had to be done. For this was a masterpiece, in a way, that deserved nothing short of a tribute video, which was finally posted by Marsh on August 17th, 2006. Remember the post I opened this video with? Have you ever seen a movie so bad that it was good? Imagine a speedrun so bad that watching it caused you to roll on the floor with laughter. The post continues. Don't get me wrong, I respect Wouter for his GoldenEye accomplishments. He may know how to shoot bullets at Russian soldiers, but he sucks at shooting coconuts and peanuts at balloons. You don't have to be a fan of DK64 to watch this video. Think of it as a speedrun satire. Think of it as a 50-minute long blooper clip. I think DK64 is one of the most disappointing titles to ever grace the N64, and watching Wouter attempt to run it fills me with a level of joy that's difficult to describe. In November 2004, GoldenEye champion Wouter Jansen completes his legendary run of the best, worst N64 game, Donkey Kong 64. Cyberwrath and I, Marsh, were given the task of verifying it for a potential SDA release. This led to one of the most comical Ventrilo sessions either of us have ever experienced. Wouter's run was rejected from the SDA. Instead, it was put on archive.org as a walkthrough demonstration, totaling 14 hours of monkey madness. His run would eventually be beaten by over 5 hours. It is possibly the worst speedrun ever seriously produced. Horrible route planning, poor execution, and Wouter seems to be slightly brain damaged during most of the run. Despite this, his run is by far the most entertaining video we've ever seen for all the wrong reasons. The following is a monument to what brought us so much joy. Thanks to Wouter and his bunny. Time to get it on like Donkey Kong. What followed was a 49-minute video edited by Marsh, a supercut of Wouter's errors and misadventures in this alleged speedrun, showing clips from every level in the game, falling off treadmills, failing to progress in relatively simple minigames, perishing to all sorts of enemies, missing tons and tons of shots, which one would think Wouter would be good at from GoldenEye, and just so many other ways one could see a speedrun fail. Many posters took to their keyboards in response to the video. I would just like to say, for the record, WTF? Ha ha ha, Dave, Brad, Hart. I've seen some of this run before, but a highlights reel is funnier with the music and deja vu. Clearly, Wouter wasn't the only one monkeying around. Eh, Mr. Gibbons? What makes it funny, I think, is that this is something we can all relate to. If you've played DK64, not speedrun it, just casual play, you've probably done at least one of the things Wouter did. There's probably been at least one part in the video that made you shout, "Hey, that happened to me." I thought that run was beautiful, loved the treadmill part. Wouter is definitely the man. Wow, just wow. You'd swear this guy wasn't even paying attention half the time, or bothered to play the game at least once beforehand. Is it just me, or does the run look like Wouter just grabbed an N64, DK64, and a 101% walkthrough and made a run on the spot? That movie was awesome. I was wondering when the Jack-in-the-Box fight was coming. And yes, perhaps the ultimate pièce de résistance was what would come around 40 minutes into the supercut. I didn't wish to show this with the rest of the frantic factory section because it may have scared off some viewers. You have survived the movie thus far. You are made of the right stuff. Your heart is hardened and prepared for the mixture of pain and pleasure. I present Wouter versus the Jack-in-the-Box, an epic battle that raged for over 26 minutes. In which we see Wouter repeatedly fall off square platforms encircling the battle with the Mad Jack boss, as he's officially known, using Tiny Kong, whose main feature involves using her ponytails to glide around when jumping, specifically to avoid falling off platforms. This is especially hilarious since this battle takes about 3 minutes for the top DK64 speedrunners today, and not only that, but the current world record for DK64 any percent, the entire game, is less than 26 minutes. So that's right, Wouter battled the boss of the third stage for longer than players can now beat the entire game. I think a big part of the reason why the reaction was so intense for this video is that this was an era before live streaming, and so no one was just sitting around watching people attempt speedruns over and over for hours a day. People really hadn't seen early stage speedruns or seen a constant stream of failures, an entry-level speedrunner, and so this gave a great window into seeing what someone's first time or two attempting a speed game might look like. One commenter in the original SDA thread was a fellow by the name of N-Gamer, and he was a fellow that really thought, and he was our hope, I guess. And also, he hosted the FTP server on which Wouter Goes Bananas, the 49-minute edit, was, hosted, and thus being downloaded from for all to see. So he had access to what we'd call today analytics, in an age before anyone knew or considered what these were. N-Gamer would provide fascinating stats on the virality of this video. Update. Wouter Goes Bananas has been downloaded and viewed by 193 people, eating 15.2 gigabytes in the process. That's nothing to worry about, we're nowhere near the monthly bandwidth limit, keep right on downloading. Believe it or not, this was actually considered quite viral for 2006, again an era just at the very beginning of YouTube and social media. I actually remember having a conversation with N-Gamer around this time, and he was pondering whether or not YouTube would still be around another 5 or 10 years, worried about link rot for video archiving purposes. He actually preferred to use the now defunct Google Video, and so that's all pretty funny looking back. But N-Gamer would share the video to other corners of the internet in the days to come, further increasing its reach. Wouter Goes Bananas has blown up on LUELinks, where it's still sitting pretty as one of the top links of the week, which moves us to 489 views, 46 gigabytes. And since people can't get into LUELinks to view the comments, I'll post them here. What the F? This guy actually has world records in GoldenEye? BS. I call shenanigans since he sucks so hard. It's just a little bit better than the last time I played DK64, when I was 9. I'm about 20 minutes into the video, and the one that's gotten me the most is the part where he defeats one of the Kremlings that drop a blueprint as Tiny, then can't manage to make it across those wooden platforms to get it. Did he not realize that Tiny has that gliding hair twirl ability? He doesn't even have to walk across the boards. But who were these people, and what was LUELinks, you might ask? Well, it was a private, invite-only offshoot forum from GameFAQs, initially made to share links to videos, torrents, and other stuff that might be a little too edgy or legally grey for the GameFAQs main boards. But it being an offshoot from GameFAQs did give it a lot of crossover between that community and some speedrunners. You can think of it almost as like an exclusive early precursor to Reddit or Dig. And by the way, I love how the SDA forum still has these buttons at the bottom so you can share a link directly to Dig or Stumble Upon. But anyways, we see a mere few hundred downloads meeting the criteria of virality at this point in internet history. A few days later, Endgamer would update even further. 10th on LUELinks Links of the Week, 9.88 out of 10 rating, 833 viewers, 79 gigabytes used. New comments. I liked the part where he wasted over 50 peanuts trying to shoot a red balloon. DK64 was very tough to try and get 100% since you had to do it with all 5 characters. This was supposed to be a speedrun? I thought it was just a video walkthrough with lots of fooling around. At least that's what it says on archive.org. In this video, they say that it was originally intended to be a speedrun, but it was so awful that the SDA guys decided to pass it off as a walkthrough demonstration. But Insectic47 in the original SDA thread has the most surmising post of all. 26 minutes for Jack in the Box? Personally, I think Wouter had his rabbit do this for him, because the Wouter we know wouldn't fail so poorly at shooting, missing things 10 plus times, or run around for 6 minutes, spend 10 seconds reading his notes, then wind up halfway across the level. Yeah, it seems like he just printed something from GameFAQs, bought DK64, popped it in, then recorded the first and only time he ran it non-stop. But honestly, that was hilarious. We need a total count for the number of times he failed the rabbit race, the owl race, the cannonball shooting thing, and Jack in the Box combined. And I don't want to know how badly he messed up on King K. Rool. On a side note, we must praise Marshmallow for showing true bravery, perseverance, and tolerance in the form of verifying and sitting through this entire 14-hour train wreck and coming out without any major head trauma and being able to share this experience with the needy. You are a true American hero. The thread on Speed Demo's archive is only 4 pages long and is still visible to this very day. So is the archive.org page where the run was initially uploaded, well before Marsh shared his edit with the SDA community. And honestly, I love that it's still out there to read and reflect upon all this time, nearly 20 years later. You know, nowadays, there have been so many great and historical events on the internet where the majority of commentary and reaction has been lost due to taking place in poorly archived Discord servers or banned and deleted comments on Reddit and Twitter. And that is, in essence, the reason I wanted to make this video and further archive the story of Wouter Goes Bananas. Yes, a few hundred people saw it when it was initially put out there nearly 20 years ago. A few hundred more have seen an archived version on YouTube uploaded back in 2016. But now perhaps even more people will have at least a sense of what it was like to be a part of a niche gaming community at the turn of the millennia, and what the speedrunning community was like, to some extent, all this time ago. Marsh would write, "As I explained during the credits, I don't intend for this to be mean-spirited. We're all friends here. This is more of a heavy ribbing and a tribute to Wouter's DK64 prowess." And I think that's true and important. I feel like this kind of ribbing simply wouldn't be something that really happens nowadays. I mean, editing someone's speedrun into a 49-minute supercut of their fails and mishaps, it would in all likelihood be seen as extremely toxic and probably cause all sorts of drama and strife in the community today. Meanwhile, back then, it was done in good faith and good fun and brought the community together, if anything. It's been said that the world you grew up in no longer exists, but perhaps, just maybe, there are still some lessons to be learned from those days gone by. Oh, and if you were wondering how Wouter himself took the whole situation, he wrote in a thread on the Elite forum, where Marsh also posted the video, "Ha ha ha, great memories. It was so awesome. I almost died from laughter. Thanks so much for this compilation. Must have been a lot of work. Oh, and everyone may humiliate me if they wish. I just can't help but laughing like crazy myself." So all's well that ends well. As alluded to by Marsh in the preamble to open the original video, in between the time Wouter first submitted the run back in November 2004 to the time of the supercut being shared on Speed Demo's archive in August 2006, we would see 2 new actual speedruns completed of Donkey Kong 64. A 4-hour 36-minute any percent time by Tom Vodova, though again the any percent nomenclature didn't really exist back then, and a new 101% time of 9 hours 2 minutes by Joe Weewell, performed in August 2006. Perhaps the release of Joe's relatively decent 101% run was just the final push needed to remind Marsh to put together what has since become a true video of legend and deep lore. And perhaps to save the best part for last, if we look at Wouter's menu screen after he defeats the last boss, his total time counter reads 1337, or leet in leet speak, and perhaps that was the ultimate prank 4D chess move after all, for Wouter to give us this little Easter egg at the end of an Odyssean DK64 speedrun. So that's the story of Wouter Goes Bananas, the first ever recorded and videoed Donkey Kong 64 speedrun, if you want to call it that, and all the reaction and glee that ensued. A huge thanks to the Speedlore legends and champions on Patreon for supporting my work in documenting this niche speedrun history, and thanks to you for watching. Stay true, my friends, and I'll see you in the next stream or video.